What if the most fake band in pop history is the reason your favorite artists own their sound, their image, and their future? Before MTV boy bands, before K-pop training systems, before TikTok could turn a chorus into a career, there were the Monkees. They didn't just make songs, they rewired how music, television, and youth culture talked to each other, but behind the smiles was a fight. Control versus commerce, art versus assembly line, and the cost of winning that fight, almost nobody tells that part. Picture this, 4 young faces on primetime TV, a theme song you can't shake, and hits flying to #1. Now ask yourself, who's really calling the shots, the band or the machine that built them? Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the deal they signed, the rules they broke, and the moment a television project became a real band with real power. This isn't just trivia. This is the origin story of modern pop. You'll see how a sitcom taught the music industry to think like a studio, how quick-cut song romps became the language of music videos, and how one band's rebellion helped normalize the idea that artists should play, write, and decide. We're following the money, the contracts, and the sound, from bubblegum hooks to country rock roots to early Moog experiments that quietly changed studio pop. Because with the Monkees, everything was upside down. The hits came first, the respect came later, and in between was a standoff with the man hired to keep them in line. They were told to mime, to smile, to sell. Instead, they pushed into the studio, grabbed the instruments, and forced a showdown that risked the entire franchise. Imagine walking away from a guaranteed hit machine just to be taken seriously. And here's the twist. The more they took control, the weirder and more interesting the art became. A band born on television making records that nudged pop towards psychedelia, sharpening guitar music that would echo into the 70s, and proving a manufactured act could outgrow its script. Even the guests around them, yes, including a certain guitar god who opened some shows and then bolted, tell you how hot and volatile this moment was. So how do you fire the architect of your own success while you're still at #1? What did that confrontation look like behind closed doors? And what changed in the music immediately once they won? Stay with me in Chapter 1. We go inside the casting call that became a chart storm, the contract language that set the trap, and the first crack in the machine that turned a TV band into a real one. In Los Angeles, 1965, radio was a sugar rush. AM Top 40 spun British invasion hits, Motown perfection, and jangly folk rock from the Byrds. On TV, variety shows like Shindig and Hullabaloo mimed the new beat to living rooms coast to coast. But behind closed doors, America was tense. Vietnam was escalating, the draft felt real. The civil rights struggle was on the evening news, and in LA, the aftershock of the 1965 Watts uprising was still in the air. The culture was young, wired on optimism, and terrified of change at the same time. That friction is the world the Monkees walked into. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the entertainment business was solving a different problem: how to keep teenagers glued to TV. In a Beatles world, network executives had seen lightning strike on the Ed Sullivan Show. What if you didn't chase it? What if you built it? Before the Monkees, the pipeline was simple. Labels made records, radio sold them, tours followed, TV helped, but it didn't own the process. In 1965, Los Angeles studios had a secret weapon: the Wrecking Crew, elite session players who could make a flawless single in hours. On the Strip, garage bands played fuzz-toned rave-ups. In Laurel Canyon, songwriters were trading folk chords and California harmonies. Transistor radios made hits feel private. You could carry your music in your pocket. Teen culture was no longer a niche, it was the economy. Hold that sound in your head. Now add television comedy timing and jump cut editing. Add the certainty of a weekly time slot. Add a writer's room for jokes and a separate writer's room for songs. That's the formula the network wanted, a sitcom with a built-in hit single every week. The ad went out. 4 young men, musical talent A must, personalities big enough to read on camera. The show would follow a struggling band in madcap misadventures. The music would be real singles sold under the same brand. Auditions flooded in, actors who could play, players who could act, unknowns, nearly knowns. Somewhere in that chaos, 4 distinct lives converged. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. This wasn't a cynical shortcut to dodge musicianship. It was a bet that the Beatle movie energy, the playful, self-aware, fast-cut charm, could be serialized and industrialized. The Monkees weren't just a band, they were an experiment to fuse TV's reach to pop's engine. Micky Dolenz, the performer's instinct. Before the drum stool, Micky was already a familiar face, child actor on Circus Boy, later gigging in LA bands, singing with a bright cutting tone that leapt off radio. He wasn't a session drummer yet, he was a natural front person with a comic's timing and a rocker's belt. Give him a camera and he'd flirt with it. Give him a moog, and pretty soon he'd try to make it sing. Davy Jones, the showman's heart. From Manchester to Broadway, Davy had the polish, trained stagecraft, timing learned under hot lights, and a voice that landed squarely in the center of American teen dreams. He'd done the grind, chorus lines, acting calls, studio bits, long before the cameras met him. When the show needed a romantic close-up and a tambourine that felt like a wink, Davy was the spark. Michael Nesmith, the writer's spine Texas raised. 12-string in hand, Nesmith had songs, opinions, and a radar for authenticity. He moved through folk club circuits and publishing offices, learning the business end the hard way. Under the wool hat was a studio head in the making. He listened for arrangements, pushed for better takes, and wrote with a country rock lean that would echo into the next decade. Peter Tork and the musician soul, Greenwich Village, folk scene alum, multi-instrumentalist, teacher, jammer. Tork brought the communal, wood and wire ethos into a neon studio world. He cared about parts, voicings, feel. If you wanted the hang of a real band, late night practice, fingers sore, ideas chasing each other, Peter carried that authenticity into a set built for speed. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the best songwriters in America were sharpening pencils. Boyce Hart, Goffin King, Neil Diamond. The show would need not one hit, but a factory's worth, A-sides, B-sides, album cuts. The Monkees would be the faces and voices. The studios would do what studios do, make it radio perfect. Fans were living a split-screen life, peace signs and protests, surfboards and sirens, Saturday morning cartoons and nightly casualty counts. Pop served as relief and mirror. If you were a teenager, authority felt both omnipresent and clueless. If you were a parent, youth culture looked loud and fast. The Monkees world on screen made a promise. You can be goofy, broke, a little chaotic, and still find a chorus that lifts you. Weekly at 7:30 p.m., hold that sound in your head. Now add the industry pressure, network schedules, sponsor demands, chart deadlines. If a single was late, a plot line could pivot to promote the next one. If a gag landed, it might shape a song's promo clip. The system would bend art to fit airtime, and for a while, it worked like a dream. The show premiered in 1966, and the machine did what it was built to do. Last Train to Clarksville went #1. The debut album, The Monkees, went #1. And suddenly, a fictional band had a very real audience. Within a year, more of the Monkees' headquarters, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Late did 4 U.S. #1 albums in a breathtaking run, teen magazines, sold-out tours, lunchboxes. The pipeline was sealed. TV, records, tickets, merch. And yet, here's the piece almost everyone misses. That success created a new kind of deficit. The more perfect the singles sounded, thanks to LA's best session players, the less the band felt like a band the audience wanted to believe. The 4 inside the frame wanted to be the thing the audience believed in. That friction grew with every platinum week. The studio system had been designed to protect consistency. Outside writers deliver hooks, session pros nail takes, producers steer the ship, but the ingredients sitting in that TV pad, Mickey's instinct, Davy's polish, Mike's pen, Peter's feel, weren't built to be passengers, they were built to drive. And the more cameras rolled, the clearer it became. A sitcom about a band was accidentally growing a real one. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, rock was mutating in public. Dylan went electric. The Byrds bent folk into raga. The Beach Boys chased symphonies in pop. In that climate, credibility mattered. Being a face on TV was power and a trap. So here's the question that turns a hit show into a fight story. What happens when the band inside the machine asks for the keys? Who gets fired first, the architects or the actors? And what changes in the music the day the door to the control room swings open? Hold that thought. In Chapter 2, we step into the showdown, contracts, credits, and the moment the Monkees tried to become the authors of their own sound, risking a franchise to become a band. After the premiere and that first #1, the room tilted, ratings, sales, and schedules aligned like a machine. And inside that machine, 4 musicians felt the walls closing in. The sessions were immaculate. LA's wrecking crew locking down takes, hitmakers like Boyce and Hart, Goffin King, and Neil Diamond delivering bulletproof hooks. But after one particular finished playback, the silence in the control room wasn't pride. It was a question: when do we get to sound like ourselves? Freeze the frame, listen to the hook one more time. It's perfect. It's also someone else's hands on the instrument, someone else's name on the chart. The Monkees were famous, but the band, the Monkees, wanted to be hadn't stepped into the room yet. The collision wasn't an accident, it was a deadline. Scripts needed songs, songs needed sessions. Sessions needed signatures. The system kept moving, and all 4 felt it. Micky with a melody idea, Mike with a 12-string pattern and a producer's ear, Peter with harmonies and chord shapes, Davy with timing and presence that could lift a chorus. They were told the fastest way to keep the charts hot was to stay out of the way. But a band is a band when it chases the feel, not just the release date. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, rock credibility was currency. Bands were writing, playing, pushing studio boundaries. If you wanted to stand in that world, you didn't mime your way there. You fought for the take. The first shockwave wasn't a stage dive. It was a piece of paper and a spin. A single was rushed toward release without the group's approval. The message between the lines was clear. The machine could hit go with or without the band's consent. Inside the camp, patience snapped. Meetings got tense. One by one, they said it out loud. We're not props, we're players. Numbers don't tell it, this clip does. Imagine 4 TV stars walking into a control room and asking for the keys, not to pose with the gear, to use it, not to smile for the cameras, to make a record the way a real group does, hands on instruments, ears on arrangements, names on the author lines. 1967 became the hinge. The music supervisor who'd been the architect of the hit factory was pushed out after that unauthorized single move. The message back to the system was louder than any promo. The band would decide what bore their name. That kind of break is risky. It can kill momentum. But sometimes a career has to survive a controlled explosion to avoid the slow burnout. And then the backlash landed. Critics had already filed them under manufactured. Fans loved the songs but didn't see the fights. The press framed the revolt as ego, not authorship. Internally, it was simpler: respect. If you hear your own voice on the radio, you should also hear your own fingerprint in the playing. May 1967, Headquarters. For the first time, the Monkees played as a band across an album. Micky on drums and vocals, Mike on guitars and songs, Peter on keys, guitar, bass, Davy on percussion and vocals. with help where it made musical sense, not as policy. The sound wasn't studio perfect in the old way. It was band honest. You could hear the air in the room, the push of players listening to each other, the decisions made at 2 a.m., because the chorus finally felt right. Freeze the frame. Listen to the groove one more time. That is not a sitcom. That is four people insisting that fame should follow the music, not the other way around. Fans got it. Tours were real. The singing was theirs. The chemistry, imperfect and alive, reached past the TV frame. Meanwhile, some critics doubled down. Too synthetic, too scripted, not real enough because of their origin story. But in the wider scene, a new idea was taking root. If even a so-called TV band can seize the studio and demand authorship at number one, then authorship isn't a luxury, it's a right. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, producers noticed contracts began to flex. The concept of the artist-producer gathered speed. Labels learned that control without trust breaks faster than it bends. The revolt wasn't a rejection of popcraft, it was a reframe. Keep the hooks, keep the reach, but let the creators drive. The Monkees didn't abandon the pipeline, they rewired it. TV to records to tour to merch, plus the studio as a place where the band's identity gets forged. That template will echo forward boy bands with writing rooms, idol systems granting in-house production roles, creator-led projects where the camera and the console serve the same vision. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. This wasn't a niche victory. It happened at the mountain's peak when the risk was greatest and the spotlight hottest. That's why it changed the industry's reflex. So what happens when a band that just took the wheel also starts reinventing how music looks? How do you turn studio control into a new visual language the entire world will copy? In Chapter 3, we follow their fast-cut romps, a Moog experiment, and a wool hat visionary whose video ideas will point directly at MTV. They weren't just selling music, they were selling permission. The Monkees gave kids a uniform, bright pop colors, boots you could actually dance in, a wool hat that said outsider but friendly, and a way to be loud in public without apologizing. Parents saw chaos and jump cuts and pratfalls. The kids saw a mirror, goofy, broke, hopeful, and somehow always landing on a chorus. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, television still treated rock as a guest star. The Monkees flipped the billing. In 1966-67, the show became the song's native habitat. Those fast-cut romps, the surreal fourth-wall-breaking mini-films where the band chased gags while the track blared, quietly standardized a language, direct-to-camera winks, smash zooms on the snare hit, a joke timed to the middle eight. Freeze the frame, watch a romp, then watch early MTV, same grammar, fewer laugh tracks. The look was anti-slick on purpose, not tuxedo cool, not leather threat, but youth club kinetic. The myth machine fed on rumors. They don't really play. It's all pre-recorded. It's a toy band. And yet, week after week, the show smuggled in the idea that a pop group could be self-aware and sincere. That's why parents complained and kids copied. The Monkees weren't pretending to be dangerous. They were proving that joy could be subversive. One studio trick you can't unhear after this, the visual cut lands with the musical accent, a jump to Davy's grin on a tambourine smack, a whip pan as the guitar hook enters, a gag on the downbeat of the chorus. The picture teaches you the rhythm before you know you've learned it. And that's why copycats never quite felt right. Most shows added music to TV. The Monkees added TV to music. Did they change slang? Maybe not with catchphrases, but they absolutely changed how pop talked on screen. Fourth wall breaks made stars feel like friends. The wardrobe said thrift store camp meets Carnaby Street, and suddenly school hallways were brighter. Radio formats noticed novelty wasn't the point anymore, energy was. The show taught programmers to think in pictures, which meant hooks had to be seen as well as heard. That logic opens the door for promo clips, then full music videos to drive playlists. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Solo the Picture, a 2-minute romp with quick edits, mime performance, silent comedy beats, and a chorus that lands like a punchline you want to hear again. That's a proto video. Fast forward to MTV, and you'll see the same bones in everything from power pop to hip hop. A camera that dances with the beat. Strip the tabloids away, and the secret weapon is arrangement. Solo the rhythm bed, hear the hand claps doubling the snare, the tambourine lighting up the back half of each bar, the bass walking simple shapes that leave oxygen for the vocal, the drum feel. Early hits favored that tight radio-ready pocket LA sessions we're famous for. No flab, all motion. By headquarters, when the band plays together, you hear the push-pull of human time. It's imperfect in a way that makes choruses feel earned. Vocal architecture, Micky's lead, bright and elastic, sits high so hooks cut through AM fuzz. Davy's sweeter timbre layers harmony and adds the smile you can hear. Mike's darker tone grounds the stack. Peter's musicianship stitches parts together. Solo, the blend on a chorus. Those choir-like stacks aren't random. They're plotted so each vowel blooms at the same moment, which is why the hooks still feel three-dimensional on tiny speakers. One studio trick you can't unhear after this, the pre-chorus often drops instruments out, just a pulse, maybe a clean guitar or shaker, so when the chorus arrives with full drums, tambourine, and doubled vocals, it feels like a door flying open. Your body learns the pattern, your brain calls it catchy. Listen to the guitar logic, bright, percussive jangle outlining simple inversions, then a single riff hook that returns like a character. Bass lines keep to roots, and fifths on verses open up and turnarounds and lock into kick patterns on choruses to lift the groove. Keys color the edges, organ swells to glue sections, piano stabs to punctuate phrases, and then there's the tech play. 1967's Daily Nightly brings in a Moog synthesizer, Micky Dolenz poking at a new machine long before the average pop act knew how to tune one. You hear portamento slides and filter sweeps not as novelty, but as texture, an early hint of how electronics would sit inside mainstream pop. Freeze the frame, listen to the oscillator glide under the vocal. That's the future humming beneath a sitcom. Pull Mickey out and you lose the elastic lead and the comic timing that makes jump cuts musical. Pull Davy out and you lose the camera-ready warmth that sells the romantic chorus. Pull Mike out and the songs lose spine. The chord choices stay safe, the arrangements less bold. Pull Peter out, and the tracks flatten. He's the glue, the theory, the touch, the musician's patience that keeps takes honest. The machine only works because the personalities are different enough to spark. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, producers and engineers were getting star billing. The Monkees records treat the control room like an instrument. Multi-tracking stacks, compression that makes hand claps feel like cannon fire, doubled leads that still sound human because the doubles aren't perfectly matched. That micro-imperfection is the smile you hear. And then the backlash landed, and critics called it synthetic. The origin story was TV first, music second, but watch what happens when the band leans into authorship. Headquarters isn't cleaner, it's truer. You can feel the kick drum breathe, the guitars argue, the harmonies lock a half beat late and somehow land exactly right. Kids didn't need the footnotes. They could hear that this wasn't just a plot device anymore, it was a group, and that's why copycats never quite felt right. Plenty of shows tried to bolt hit songs onto sitcoms. Few understood you need the right chemistry in the mix, and you need to cut the picture like a drummer. The Monkees controversy accidentally built a rule book. If the visuals don't groove, the songs won't stick. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Michael Nesmith didn't stop at good videos. He imagined a world where video was the album. In the early 80s, his pop clips concept sketched a channel of nothing but music clips. His Elephant Parts video album would go on to win the first ever Grammy for Video of the Year. Translate that, a monkey helped formalize the business model that made MTV matter. The jump cuts, the visual hooks, the direct-to-camera charm. The grammar written in 66 gets its own network in 81. Numbers don't tell it, this clip does. Watch a Nesmith short from the period. Listen to how cuts sync to musical logic, how jokes hit on drum fills, how story and song trade leads without dropping the beat. That's the Monkees mid-game perfected. Open your phone and scroll. Everything is cut to the chorus now. Skits collapse into hooks. Hooks turn into memes. Memes sell tours. The Monkees weren't an accident on the way to that reality. They were the rehearsal. Their image and controversy built attention. Their craft kept you there. Solo the tambourine. Hear the edit. Feel the choir stack bloom, and suddenly you understand why these records still win on tiny speakers and giant nostalgia playlists alike. So if the picture taught the ear, who taught the picture? Who wrote the perfect pop sentences? And how did the best session players in LA make them feel inevitable? In Chapter 4, we go inside the song factory, the hook architects, the studio tricks, and the exact moves that turned good idea into global earworm. Behind the posters was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity. The Monkees had built a pipeline no one had seen before, TV to records to tours to merch. And then they had the courage to seize their own studio. But the same machine that made them huge also ran them down. We're going to sit with this for a second. By late 1966 into 1967, everything was on a timer. Script days, record nights, radio interviews at dawn, flights at noon, a stage at 8, then back to the set at 9 the next morning. TV needed episodes, the label needed singles, promoters needed bodies on stage. The calendar looked like a barcode. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. Those cheerful edits hit a real fatigue. You can smile for the camera, your bones don't lie. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, Album as Art had arrived. Competition wasn't just other TV stars, it was bands making grand statements on vinyl. The Monkees had insisted on authorship, which meant the bar rose. They weren't just delivering appearances, they were delivering themselves. That is thrilling. It is also exhausting. 133 O's creative stalemates, the price of control. Taking the studio key meant taking the weight. Which songs make the cut? Who plays what? How much do you lean into the hits versus the restless, weirder ideas? Arguments are healthy in a band until they aren't. A chorus that could have been decided by a producer now took 3 late-night debates and a thin morning. This is the part fans don't put on t-shirts. The sound of 4 people who care, pulling in different directions, still trying to meet the deadline. Freeze the frame. Remember the victory of Headquarters. Now remember the expectation that the next one must be bigger, truer, and perfectly on time. That pressure doesn't leave fingerprints in the liner notes, but you can hear it in the air between the snare and the tambourine. The show sold freedom and fun. The tabloids sold another story. Are they real? Are they over? Kids saw Friends on TV. Critics saw Targets. The group lived between those two cameras. Then came the art move that should have reset everything. A surreal, self-mocking feature film that tried to blow up the old image and start fresh. On paper, brave. In practice, a commercial stumble. The audience who loved the sitcom didn't know what to do with a pop psychedelic mirror maze. The industry's knives got sharper. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. When a big swing misses, you pay with momentum, and momentum in pop is oxygen. No one is built to be everywhere at once. Voices get tired, hands cramp, family calls go unanswered. The rules of TV and the rules of touring pull in opposite directions. One wants you perfectly lit and on your mark. The other wants you raw and present in a room that smells like beer and heat. Inside the band, the small frictions that once fueled chemistry began to scrape. What should we play live? How much of the set should be the old hits? Who leads which song? None of these are crimes. They are how groups break. We're going to sit with this for a second. A band that fought so hard to be taken seriously now had to protect its energy just to stand up straight. Sigma 730, money, credit, and the invisible scoreboard. Every hit leaves paper behind. Contracts, splits, residuals, points. TV royalties flow one way. Record royalties another. Publishing another still. Credit is oxygen in this business. Who wrote the line? Who played the part? Who got their name on the sleeve? When you're young and running, you sign what keeps the train moving. When you slow down, you read what you signed. That's when the air gets cold. Respect isn't just applause, it's what the ledger says. And the ledger has a long memory. One more beat of honesty. When people around you, executives, handlers, publicists, start negotiating your future in rooms you're not in, it eats at trust. You can love each other and still feel alone in the paperwork. The end didn't arrive like a car crash. It came like a calendar. First a friend steps back to breathe, then another cracks under the grind. Then the project that was supposed to reboot the myth lands with a thud. And suddenly the phone rings. Less. Tours change shape. Studio time feels different. A lineup shift that looked temporary becomes the new normal. Fans say, without that person, it isn't real. And they're not wrong. They're talking about chemistry, that unprintable ingredient the machine can't mass produce. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. The choruses still lift, but they lift a narrower room. Behind the posters was a price tag. Sleep bought with adrenaline. Sanity rented by the week. The incident that changed the chemistry wasn't one headline. It was a stack. A project that confused the base. A schedule that broke the body, a business structure that treated the band name like a storefront more than a family name. Most acts fade. The Monkees didn't fade. They detonate in stages. On TV, the lights go down. On records, the returns get thinner. On stage, the faces change. The legend freezes young and fast instead of growing safe and slow. We're going to sit with this for a second. Feel the room after the last chord. How long the air hangs when people don't know if it's the end or the start of something else, because the cost is the proof. You don't pay this much for a gimmick. You pay it for a fight over meaning. Who gets to say what a band is? Who gets to steer the craft? Who gets to walk away with a name and still sleep at night? The Monkees showed that a pop act born on TV could grow a conscience and pay for it in real time. That's not a scandal, that's a legacy. So what survives the blast? What carries forward when the shows are reruns and the set has been struck? In Chapter 5, we follow the afterlife. Video grammar turned into MTV. Country rock seeds that flowered. Revivals that proved the songs still breathe. And we ask the bigger question, how do you measure influence when the blueprint becomes the building everyone lives in? Stay with me. Before the Monkees pop on TV sounded like guest spots and safe variety turns. After them, everyone chased their thing. Songs that lived as pictures, bands that fought for authorship, a pipeline where image and hook moved as one. Even artists who've never studied the show are living in the echo. Music that performs to camera, creators who write and star in their own myth, audiences who expect the chorus to arrive with a cut. Spot the lineage, boy band eras, borrowing tight harmonies and personality archetypes, power pop lifers chasing those chiming guitars and stacked choruses, country rock folding in Nesmith's 12-string spine, video culture cutting jokes and jump cuts on the beat, because the show trained us to hear with our eyes. Smash Mouth's hit cover of I'm a Believer 2001 proved the songs still detonate in new decades. Syncs and covers keep renewing the catalog for new ears. Energy nudge, spot the lineage, hear modern clips, cut edits on snare hits and chorus downbeats. That grammar, it's 66 with better cameras. Saturday morning reruns in the late 60s, early 70s minted a second generation of fans. MTV's 1986 marathon minted a third, and a reunion single that was then, This Is Now, climbed the charts. The feature film Head, once a commercial stumble, grew into a cult object that critics now read as a meta-pop experiment. Tribute nights, cover bands, murals, box set reissues, each wave adds annotations to the myth and keeps the harmonies in circulation. Energy nudge. One clip you've seen 1,000 times, Monkees in a Romp, is the prototype for half of 80s, 90s music TV. Nesmith's Papa Jean's Blues and What Am I Doing Hanging Round sketch the country rock map that the 70s would color in. Head pivots towards psychedelia, ironic, self-aware, hypnotic, and Porpoise Song still floats like a dream over tape edits and choir stacks. And then the video afterlife. Nesmith's later video projects formalized what the show implied. Music could be released as moving image, not just illustrated by it. That idea becomes a business model. Energy nudge. One studio trick you can't unhear. Listen to those choir-stacked choruses bloom on tiny speakers. That's why the songs survive every format. Yes, they toured as a real band, sweat, monitors, bum notes, and all. And for a brief electric stretch in 1967, Jimi Hendrix even opened shows before drifting to a better fit. That odd pairing says everything. The Monkees sat at the crossroads of pop commerce and rock credibility. Depending on where you stood, they were either mainstream disruptors or stealth radicals. Both can be true. Energy nudge. Freeze the frame. What looks like TV fluff turns into a gateway drug to deeper guitar music for millions of kids. A 2025 listener hears layers earlier fans didn't. The Moog textures on Daily Nightly as proto-electronic pop, the human time of Headquarters as a counter-argument to grid-perfect tracks, the Rye, direct-to-camera tone as the ancestor of creator culture. In a world where an iPhone can be a studio and a network, the Monkees' pipeline, character, camera, chorus feels less like a novelty and more like a manual. Energy nudge. Okay, hear a modern hook drop after a 2-bar pre-chorus. The Monkees' drop and bloom trick taught your body that move. If you're new, start with I'm a Believer and Pleasant Valley Sunday, hooks and harmony as architecture. Then jump to The Girl I Knew Somewhere to feel the jangle tighten. You just may be the one for Nesmith's Writer's Bones. What Am I Doing Hanging Round for the country rock handoff, and Porpoise Song to see the psychedelic mask slip. Album path, The Monkees, pop birth, Headquarters, band identity, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones late whited, studio imagination. Then explore the Head soundtrack for the brave left turn, energy nudge, solo the tambourine, hear how it ignites the back half of the bar. That tiny spark is why these choruses still lift. We lost Davy Jones in 2012, Peter Tork in 2019, Michael Nesmith in 2021. Micky Dolenz keeps the flame with care. Reunions, tribute tours, late period albums, archival drops. Each one functions as both celebration and footnote. The ledger of influence is longer than the chart stats. Producers who learned to cut picture to rhythm, bands who insisted on credits, fans who discovered authorship because a so-called manufactured act chose to become a band. Energy nudge, soft. We're gonna sit with this. Legends are made of songs and decisions. The Monkees left both. Before the Monkees pop on TV was a cameo. After them, the camera became an instrument and artists fought for the studio key. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. Your turn. What was the first Monkees track that hit you in the chest? Was it the sugar high of I'm a Believer, the skyline crunch of Pleasant Valley Sunday, or the underwater glow of Porpoise Song? Drop it in the comments. Your pick goes in the pinned playlist so this history stays alive. This is Pop Lore. Subscribe so this story doesn't get erased by the algorithm, and hit the next episode where we trace how a wool hat, a video album, and a late-night idea helped build MTV's rulebook. Then we follow the ripple to the modern creator era, from TV banned to Video Nation